Uploading.
700,000 metric tons. 15 decks, computer systems augmented with bioneural circuitry. Top cruising speed, warp 9.975.
The Intrepid-class vessel was designed and constructed during a very unique time for the Federation and Starfleet. We don't have the exact details on when the vessel went into active service, at least in the main continuity, but we do know that it was there by the 2370s, and there were multiple vessels of the type. The Intrepid is usually included in a battery of ships that have been deemed the quote-unquote anti-Borg armada.
When Shelby came into tactical, every admiral's uncle had a take on this Borg business. She cut through it. She put us on track.
Again, we don't have definitives, but this very well may be true. What we do know is that the new weapons and ship designs were being considered and tested to counter an unfriendly universe. Starfleet was working amazingly fast to combat the threat posed by the Collective. This would only increase with the introduction of the Dominion. However, it's worth delving a bit more into the mentality and perhaps the moral crisis that the United Federation of Planets was experiencing. Ironically, it would inform the design of the Intrepid itself. With the Borg and Dominion threats looming, Starfleet security and a high number of admirals in Starfleet Command likely wanted to begin production of more militaristic vessels. Indeed, we even see them bringing a ship created specifically for war out of mothballs when the Dominion became too much. All of this would lead into the mentality when constructing the Intrepid. There was likely a push and pull, and ultimately, I do think that the design was likely a compromise between the need for a light scout military vessel and a long-range exploration ship. The vessel filled a dual role for both military uses and that of science and discovery. Basically a mentality that the original series had that should never have been forgotten. Looking at the Intrepid itself, it's 344 meters long with a dry weight of about 700,000 metric tons. It has 15 decks and can hold at least 150 personnel that all exist in the space of 257 rooms. Everything that I find seems to indicate that it would be able to hold many more people, which is consistent with how Starfleet makes its vessels. The ship's design is streamlined in comparison to previous bulkier versions from Starfleet. It would consist of an oval-shaped primary hull connected to a secondary hull. The secondary hull would have specialized nacelles that, when activated, tilted when entering into warp. While I couldn't find any evidence of it being stated specifically, it is theorized that the difference in the angle of the warp nacelles prevents spatial tears in subspace that older designs had been proven to create. It is worth noting, in the Voyager episode Renaissance Man, the Doctor does state that the warp core still causes damage in space, and he's never countered by the crew. While I did state there was no direct evidence that this is why the nacelles tilted or why they were designed the way they were, all other evidence leads me to believe that these were eco-friendly nacelles. In fact, this new eco-friendly feature is seemingly incorporated in all peer vessels as well as future ones that would be developed, though the Intrepid is the only one to have the nacelles actually move, at least as of the upload of this essay.
To live is to battle. To battle is to conquer. To conquer is to be Klingon.
If you're a fan of the channel, you know one of my favorite Trek story arcs is that of the Dominion War. Now, thanks to Star Trek Fleet Command, I can have that experience in the palm of my hand. With Fleet Command, I can be a part of the Star Trek multiverse and craft my very own Dominion War arc. By sending away teams on expedition missions to the edge of space, acquiring resources for developing new improvements, forging alliances, and earning renown through the faction system, I am not only able to unlock new ships and iconic characters, but experience a truly unique and historic Star Trek story that's of my own making. With Star Trek Fleet Command, you'll be able to research technologies and build your own base so that you can explore strange new worlds and meet strange new civilizations. It is finally possible to go where no one has gone before, and it's all in the palm of your hand. To start your amazing Trek story, download this game by clicking the link below. For me personally, I absolutely love the ability to craft my own ship and fleet. I chose my own crew from the vessel, any that I wanted from the Star Trek universe, and then went out and explored. I loved experiencing the universe that was made for me in this game and going through the story that's updated every month. Not to mention teaching normies a lesson or two when they tried to attack me or attack someone weaker. Star Trek Fleet Command is free to download, and if you get in on this now, you'll have a chance to be a part of amazing giveaways that are occurring as we speak. Download now to see what kind of giveaways you could be getting today. Star Trek Fleet Command. Go ahead, just do it. Supporting the sponsors supports the channel, and it's free. Come on. The layout is pretty standard for most Starfleet ships, with Deck 1 incorporating the main bridge, briefing room, and Captain's Ready Room. Deck 2 encompasses the mess hall and Captain's private dining hall, which leads us into Deck 3, where the commanding officer's quarters are. Speaking on crew accommodations, they would range from sparse to lavish depending on your rank. General crew quarters were small and located deep within the primary hull. They had no windows and only a bathroom, living area, and bedroom. Apparently these crew spaces were meant to be shared between crewmates, though we commonly only see one bed. Kinky. Junior officers might be assigned to these and be allowed to live there alone. The officers' quarters were along the edge of the saucer section, allowing personnel to see the vastness of space, which also included a living area, bedroom, and bathroom, though they were much more spacious. The captain's quarters was large and located on Deck 3 near the bridge. It included a large desk with work terminal, quarters, bathroom, bedroom, and 5 windows to see outside. 'Cause why not?
You think when they designed this thing, they would have...
The ship was built for combat performance, Harry, not musical performance.
The weapon systems were extremely stout for a ship of the Intrepid's size. The saucer section is covered by phaser arrays curved along the aft of the vessel and length of the saucer itself. 2 smaller arrays were in place towards the backside, allowing for full coverage of the vessel. In all, it would have up to 14 phaser arrays that would ensure that it had a 360-degree defense of the entire ship. The vessel also had torpedo tubes that were specifically designed for Type 6, Class 9, and Class 10 photon torpedoes, along with quantum torpedoes and even tri-cobalt devices, which were extremely experimental. Basically, the photon torpedo tubes were designed to be magic, firing everything that Starfleet had, even though we know that tubes need to be specialized in order to fire them, and yet they all come out of the same area. It's magic, people. Space magic. The ship had 14 external shield grids that were superior to previous designs. The installed components included multiphasic and multispectrum shielding that were so strong that an Intrepid would be able to survive a binar, pulsar, and planetary explosion, at least for a short amount of time. One of the newest innovations that sounds great on paper but is an absolutely horrible idea is the creation of the bio-neurogel packs. These packs would add an organic component to the ship, allowing for information to be processed at much faster speeds than that of earlier isolinear options. Of course, don't worry. Using these would only be a problem if the gels were susceptible to bioterrorist attack or they had to face an enemy that literally assimilated organic material. Hopefully those two things never occur. The computer system was the most advanced in the fleet for its time. It was so powerful that it was able to process 47 million data channels while sustaining 575 trillion calculations per nanosecond. The computer would remain operational in temperatures of 10 degrees Kelvin to 1790 degrees Kelvin, or for the normies, negative 441 degrees Fahrenheit to positive 2,762 degrees Fahrenheit, which, ironically, makes it weaker than some metals we have today. Apparently, tungsten's melting point is 6,177 degrees Fahrenheit, so I guess get good, Intrepid. Get good. The medical facility was top of the line with a newly installed emergency medical hologram, ICU, biohazard support area, critical care unit, and even a morgue. The chief medical officer would have their own office, and the medical bay comes installed with a standard 3 biobeds and emergency surgical bed. The technology was so advanced and successful that the same medical facility would be installed on the Sovereign class. There were at least 3 transporter rooms located on Deck 4, with 6 standard pads allowing for the transport of the same amount of sentience. Looking at the layout, the transporter officer is across from the transporter pad on an elevated platform with a console. Like previous ships, the Intrepid has multiple cargo bays that incorporated their own transporters. Cargo bays were also apparently specialized for specific research projects. As an example, Cargo Bay 2 was designed for organic storage and allowed for adjustable environmental controls. Shuttle bays would be located on Deck 10 to the aft dorsal. Most shuttles utilized Shuttle Bay 1, which was a large L-shaped room. Like previous designs, there was an arresting field that would help slow down incoming incoming craft. The vessel would even have an auxiliary shuttle bay known as, wait for it, Shuttle Bay 2, which allowed for maintenance and even construction of different vessels. The ships were generally given a complement of Class 2 shuttles and Type 6 shuttlecrafts. Along with the shuttle bay, the vessel would have an aero shuttle built into the superstructure of the chassis. Located on the bottom, it would be utilized for multiple specialized missions or even for escape. As stated, the ship would also have to have a scientific purpose, which means that there would be multiple research labs. These included biology, medical, holographic research, and ultimately stellar cartography. Stellar cartography is one of those that is a bit controversial, however. Initially, when the USS Voyager was launched, it apparently didn't have a stellar cartography bay. One was created by the crew when the vessel had been stranded. There is some debate on whether Voyager was launched too early and not completed, or was never meant to have one. As of the upload of this essay, we don't know one way or the other. The propulsion systems was, as noted, probably the greatest innovation in Starfleet design of the time. The Intrepid class has a Class 8 warp drive with a tricyclic input manifold. With the ability to create 4,000 teradynes of power per second, the vessel could travel at warp 9.975 for up to 12 hours. Probably. We'll come back to that a little bit later. Additionally, the chamber was specialized so it would allow the vessel to operate for up to 3 years before the necessity of refueling. This was done via a process of recrystallization. There was also apparently a secondary warp assembly, though this rarely, if ever, comes up. It's like the crew forgot the existence at critical points, making their jobs harder, and the plot seem almost impossible. I've already discussed the layouts and decks a bit, so I won't be going too far into this. I also have supplementary videos you guys can take a look at. I will say that command and control is located on deck 1, with the bridge seeming more like a luxury liner than one for combat. The aesthetics are still reflective of the Federation's golden era. The next most vital part of the ship would have to be engineering, which has 2 different levels to allow for the larger warp core. Main engineering is located on the lower deck with the most critical systems, and the secondary level would have the auxiliary subsystems and be a nice area to talk without anyone seeing you. Fancy that. The most notable and well-known vessel is that of the USS Voyager, where it made a quote-unquote unscheduled 7-year mission in the Delta Quadrant. This arduous voyage proved that the vessel had the wherewithal to survive deep space exploration. It also proved that it was a capable combat vessel and could take on anything from multiple inferior vessels swarming to a larger superior vessel that outmatched it drastically. Even the Borg Collective identified that the Intrepid was a match for a Borg probe, and Voyager even defeated several larger Borg vessels. A lesser-known ship is that of the USS Bellerophon. It was the command ship for Admiral William Ross, and its claim to fame was its presence at the Romulus Conference for the Dominion War in 2375. I do like its inclusion because it does show how versatile the ship was as a combat and courier vessel. There are 2 other vessels that we are aware of, the USS Intrepid and USS Valiant. A lot of ships were called the Valiant. That had to get confusing. During the Voyager episode In the Flesh, it stated that the USS Intrepid is on a 3-year mission patrolling the neutral zone, which may have been based on actual information or just made up for that simulation. Unfortunately, we don't know a lot about any ships not named Voyager. Looking at the real world, the design for the ship started around 1993. Ultimately, they wanted a vessel that was quote-unquote a sleek bullet of a ship built for action, and they started putting it together. It went through several redesigns until it fell upon the one we see today. The class was also originally going to be called the Mercury class before Intrepid was chosen instead. As no one will be surprised, the warp abilities of the vessel constantly stay in flux. In some instances, it would be stated that warp 9.975 could only be sustained for a few minutes, when in the next episode they had been at that speed for quite a while. In several episodes, warp 6.2 was considered the cruising speed for the ship. In other instances, warp 9.975 is considered the cruising speed, and one that is relatively safe to do. Though, something that seems consistent is that it appears to be a double-edged sword. While the vessels can travel at this speed comfortably, it reduces the amount of fuel below the 3-year mark that it generally would have, and begins to damage the superstructure and subsystems, meaning that there would be more maintenance necessary. The Intrepid class is featured in Star Trek Armada 2, Star Trek Starfleet Command 3, Star Trek Elite Forces, and Star Trek Elite Forces 1 and 2, as well as Star Trek Legacy. Lastly, I'd argue that the Intrepid began the full-scale use of more rounded curves and edges versus that of the bulkier designs of the former Enterprises. This began the era of sleekness, if you will. The most important piece to this is that every Intrepid would come standard with a gelato machine. And I gotta say, I really do enjoy the design. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to rate, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next Lore Reloaded.